This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include former Lieutenant Governor Dennis Wicker, Syndicated columnist and author of the new book Catalyst, John Hood, NC Policy Watch's Chris Fitzsimon, and former representative from Nash County, Gene Arnold. Well, this week we should discuss how we're going to react to our unemployment fund building up to $1 billion. We asked whether Speaker Moore's campaign finance report is an error in reporting or reporting sensationalism. And we talk about Governor McCrory's request to halt Syrians coming into North Carolina. We've got a full show, so let's get started. The horrible tragedy in Paris is a reminder that terrorism can happen at any time in any place, and it's increasingly difficult to identify terrorists coming into our countries and our state. Governor McCrory, along with governors of many states, has asked the federal government not to allow Syrians to immigrate into North Carolina. As he explained on CNN, he's not saying we don't want immigrants, only that he wants to ensure that better security checks make sure known terrorists are not admitted. Chris, this has become highly politicized, and many on the left are saying that it's politically motivated. It's a move pandering to the right and really goes to the deeper issue of immigration in North Carolina. What's your take?
Well, I thought it was fascinating. First of all, we had a state leader that said on Friday that he was assured and felt comfortable with the Syrians who were coming into North Carolina, that they had security checks and that they weren't a danger, and that politician was Governor Pat McCrory. On Friday, he said that. Then he had a press conference on this past week, reversing himself after a lot of Republican governors and a lot of other people in the country said that. The irony to me is that refugees, we've had refugees in this country for years, decades and decades. Not one has ever been implicated in a terrorist plot. They are vetted far greater than a lot of other people that come into this country. It takes 2 to 3 years sometimes for refugees to get here. The Syrian people, the people who are leaving Syria are victims of violence and oppression. That's the people we've always welcomed to this country. And in terms of making it a political act, not long after the governor made that statement, his campaign sent a fundraiser out saying, I'm keeping the Syrians out of North Carolina, send me some money.
But Gene, isn't this situation changed a little bit from a standpoint of just this week, the ISIS said they were going to attack New York and Washington, and what took place in Paris is terrible. People are concerned. They're scared.
They are, and I don't know of any vetting system that is in place today that you could determine if there is a terrorist in that group. But you've got to believe that if there are immigrants going to come from Syria, the terrorists are going to plant some of their people in that group. It's just going to happen. On top of that, we're trying to figure out a way to cope with the illegal Mexicans that are in the country, too. How many problems do you want to dwell on with this immigration problem?
Dennis, you've been very close to the highest power in North Carolina for a long, long time. Politically, practically, what can the governor do to prevent Syrians?
That's the question I would raise. I mean, really, if you read what the powers of the governor are, it doesn't have anything to do with immigration, I can assure you. He actually has no power to stop immigrants from coming into the state. And I think that what we've got to do is look at the situation and make the best of what is a very, very terrible, terrible condition in these countries where these refugees are going. I think the vetting system, Gene, actually is pretty good. When you have the FBI, the Homeland Security, and the State Department all chiming in together on intelligence, I got to believe they can take 10,000 refugees and vet them and make sure that they're not security risks. So I really think we ought to stick with what our values are in this country.
They thought they had done that in France, didn't they, John?
No.
Well, look, okay, let's start over here. First thing I will say is
Are we going to reset this
North Carolina Democrats are very lucky that they're probably going to have somebody like Roy Cooper on the ballot next year and not Barack Obama. Roy Cooper has now agreed with McCrory, as most people do. It is common sense to think about the necessary requirements to vet. The argument here is not that North Carolina will never take refugees. The argument is that there needs to be a pause in the system because the director of the FBI said they lack the information to do the vetting. Now, furthermore, there have certainly been refugees that have been implicated in ISIS terrorist incidents, not from Syria. There have been refugees from Bosnia that have been recruited into ISIS and attempted to do things in America, refugees from Somalia in Minneapolis that did this. The British media had lengthy stories about them today, on Wednesday, the day we're talking. So the common sense argument here is not we should never take refugees. Of course we should take refugees. Most of these refugees are women, children, or old men and women. They're unlikely to be threats. And after some pause to make sure, this is a question of leadership. Effective leaders recognize the public is concerned. The public has legitimate concerns. And you don't insult people who have legitimate concerns by saying, well, they must be racist, this is shameful. What we have here is ineffective, shameful leadership in Washington, and governors saying, get your act together.
Here's what's shameful. Governor McCrory said he wanted more information about what the White House plan was. There's a conference call today, this past week, about what was going to go on and how they were being vetted. Governor McCrory couldn't make the phone call because he was flying to the Republican Governors Association. Could he be late for a Republican governors meeting and listen to what the White House is saying? And you know who the most compelling person on this? Condoleezza Rice, who knows something about national security, said at an event in Alabama with the Alabama governor after he was making the same points that John and Gene are making, that it's a disgrace and that we should take these folks after they're thoroughly vetted.
That's McCrory's position too.
Well, we're vetting them now. It takes 2 to 3 years. The vetting process is very extensive.
Not these Syrian refugees.
No, he's right. No, it has taken 18 months to 24 months for the Syrian refugees to go through the system. The problem is they don't have anybody to check with in Syria. The government is non-existent in much of the country. They don't have the records. What I would suggest they do is they go ahead and expedite settlement of refugees, of children. There's some orphans in the system. There are elderly refugees in the system. Go ahead and expedite that. You do have some young men in their prime age potential terrorist targets. The vast majority of them are almost certainly not associated with ISIS. But there is nothing wrong with suspending the process, as Democrats and Republicans, other than the president, have figured out is the correct policy.
Even the Congress has been calling for this, Dennis, and they say that they are convinced from the phone calls and emails and so forth that they're getting that they're representing the desires of the American public. President Obama said that their position was just absolutely shameful. Who's right and wrong here? Or is this just another example of the political differentiation in America?
Well, look, how can we hold ourselves out to the world that we're a nation where we try to take care of the poor and we want to take people in, children, orphans, women who have been totally disfranchised by their own country and are running from fear? We represent ourselves as a beacon to the world and holding the value that we want to bring human life here and nurture and grow and develop and keep it safe.
But McCrory says he gets that, Gene, but he says his primary concern is the safety and security of 9 million North Carolinians.
Absolutely. And you're going to add 10,000 people to the welfare rolls because the federal government says if you bring them in, then you must give them an education and free hospital care. Plus, the vetting system didn't work too good for the people who, at 9/11.
They were not refugees, political refugees.
They came in the country.
They came a totally different way, so it's not relevant. It doesn't.
Actually, it is relevant because, the argument here was, well, the refugees go through this vetting process, but the real danger is that it's easy to come in through student visas and so forth, like in 9/11. Why haven't we done anything about that? This is outrageous that they think this is no issue.
Right now is because the governor held a press conference and said he wanted to keep them out of North Carolina. And then he rolled that back. Then he rolled that back and said, well, no, not exactly. And the point is, he can do nothing to keep them out of North Carolina. So why have the press conference?
Why are we having this
conversation? Why are we throwing that red meat out there?
You know why? Because
most of the governors now.
But Dennis, most of the governors in the country, and about 32 governors, most of the Republicans and many of the Democrats in the Senate are all saying we should do something about this. The governor obviously has no unilateral authority here, but he's part of a national pushback against the president, a pushback that I think is obviously going to succeed.
And the governor can send out a fundraising appeal, which he's done.
Roy Cooper has endorsed the same policy that
shame on Roy
McCrory
Cooper, as far as I'm concerned.
I think I'm going to send out a fundraising appeal, too. We thank you for watching NC Spin on the air or on YouTube. Here's a reminder, there's much more on our website, ncspin.com, or NC Spin on Facebook. You'll find video footage not seen anywhere else, perspective pieces from our panel, and our weekly column. Get more balanced debate for the Old North State on ncspin.com, NC Spin on Facebook, or on Twitter at NC Spin Tweets. After we come back, we're going to talk about what's going on with House Speaker Moore.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
I'm Ron Elmer, investment advisor and CPA. I'll save the state $50 million my first year or work for free. Learn more at elmerfortreasurer.com. Paid by Citizens for Elmer.
Phones are getting smarter, cars more efficient, TVs bigger and more stunning. Imagine the same innovation from agriculture. Meet the Plant Sciences Initiative at NC State, a proposed state-of-the-art research complex where world-class researchers will tackle agriculture's toughest challenges, like feeding the world's rapidly growing population while preserving natural resources for future generations. Join Farm Bureau and NC State in moving North Carolina to the forefront of ag research in the world. Visit keepaggrowing.org.
Hey everyone, I'm Linda Loveland. If feeding your family safe, affordable foods is a priority for you, then join me in saying thanks to the North Carolina farmers who feed us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's say thanks to the farmers who feed your family at #ThankNCFarmers. To learn more about the foods we eat and the farm families who feed us, visit feedthedialoguenc.com. And be sure to thank North Carolina farmers.
We now return to NC Spin.
Charlotte TV station WBTV aired a story alleging House Speaker Tim Moore had problems with campaign finance reports when an audit by the State Board of Elections said he failed to itemize details of credit card expenses. Moore's campaign treasurer took the blame, saying Moore had done nothing wrong, had given her the details, but she failed to itemize them. Meanwhile, Moore's supporters say this is nothing more than a hatchet job by a reporter who had sought a job with Moore but hadn't gotten one. Dennis, you've had to file a lot of these campaign finance reports during your time in office. In your opinion, is this a reporting oversight that's been corrected, or is it sensationalized reporting?
Well, as Deion Sanders used to say when he was asked does he like to play offense or defense in the NFL, he said both. It's probably a little bit of both, Tom. You know, Treasurer Moore, I'm sorry, not Treasurer
Speaker Moore.
Speaker Moore. He was cited.
You can't get that man off your mind.
I understand that. He was cited and said, look, you got to get your report in order. He did it. Then this reporter came along and said, wait a minute, I got something here. And they start investigating it. He goes to the treasurer. The treasurer explains, I think plausibly, what happened. She filed the report and kept the itemized items of the charges in her file. And the reporter was relentless in their reporting and kept on it. To me, the speaker fixed his problem. It's a lot different than the Fletcher Hartzell situation. I don't see much of a story here, quite frankly, Tom.
Why do you make of the point, Gene, that this reporter had tried to find a job with House Speaker Moore and had not? He never formally applied, but he was also informed he wasn't going to get it. Now he goes to work for WBTV and does this hatchet job.
Gotcha. That's what he was playing, and I think he was trying to create something that would give him a little more standing or whatever.
Tom, but
he went down to the TV reporter, is what you're saying. And I don't
as a former TV reporter, wait a minute.
I thought you used to play one on television.
But let's be clear about this. The reporter involved was called by the folks in Moore's office. He said he would talk to him about it. Then they called him again. He said, no, I don't want the job. I'd rather live in Charlotte. He wasn't turned down for a job. He was no longer interested in the job. And WBTV, where he works, WBTV in Charlotte, put all this on the website and explained it all. This may not be the biggest story in the world. I don't think it is. But Speaker Moore I think made a major mistake, a PR mistake, by being very confrontational. He just should have explained to the reporter. He should have met with him and done an interview. A lot of people don't understand why reporters go chase politicians around. This reporter tried I don't know how many times, several times to get an interview. That would have settled this and would have been much easier.
All right, John, is this you've been in the news media business. Is this sensationalized reporting or not?
I think Chris has stumbled his way accidentally into the truth. There was not a whole lot of a problem with the original reports.
Campaign finance report.
I think the stories were legitimate. I think they got blown up because of how they were handled. So this is a case where if you make a mistake, admit it. It's not that big a mistake, but now the story's bigger than it ought to be.
If this reporter keeps following politicians around, he'll get his big story. Just keep on.
I think I said
but
last
nobody's
week,
found any improper expenditures here.
But what's interesting is that there are some out there. I think I mentioned last week on the show or the week before that there are a lot of legislators who use credit cards and make big payments, and the law says they have to disclose what those payments are, and there are some questionable payments, not necessarily in Speaker Moore's report. This is a story we're going to continue to hear more about.
I don't think there's any question about it, and does it portend what we're going to see in 2016 elections, Dennis?
It's just the tip of the iceberg.
Look, it's going to get worse and worse.
It's going to get worse and worse, as they say in Lee County. I got to tell you, this is really not a big story. I do think Chris is onto something about it being more of a story than it should be because of the way it was handled. But Speaker Moore has done nothing wrong. He's corrected his mistake. State Board of Elections seems to be satisfied. End of story.
So this is another case where we've wasted the viewers' time for 5 minutes. After these messages, we're going to come back and try to redeem ourselves in talking about unemployment insurance funds.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Each year, our state pension plan pays more than $500 million in investment fees. I'm Ron Elmer for Treasurer, and I'll save $50 million or work for free. Go to elmerfortreasurer.com, paid by Citizens for Elmer.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
It's a fact. Patients who receive care in the medical home from a trusted family physician reduce healthcare costs through prevention, early detection, and affordable management of high-cost chronic diseases.
Every dollar invested in healthcare matters. Let's invest them wisely, building on North Carolina's medical home model. Better health begins with a medical home, a trusted family physician, the best return on our healthcare investment. Learn about the importance of medical homes at ournchealthcare.com.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, come on, we're leaving.
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
We now return to NC Spin.
During the Great Recession, North Carolina depleted the unemployment benefits fund used to pay unemployed workers. Now, in response, the state cut unemployment benefits and raised the amounts employers have to pay in. Governor McCrory and the Commerce Department reported recently that the fund has now built up to a $1 billion surplus, triggering the suspension of a 20% surcharge our state employers have to pay into the fund. Gene Arnold, it's good to know the fund has been restored, but some favor continuing the surcharge so as to make sure it gets even bigger so that we don't have problems if we have another recession. Others say we should be restoring benefits to those receiving unemployment. What course would you adopt?
Well, I think it's automatic that the surcharge would go away since it's met the $1 billion mark. I think this happened in 1994 in the General Assembly when the fund was depleted, borrowed money from the government and paid that off over about 4 or 5 year period. So this is not new. They've got the payments as low, I think, as you can, or the length of time that people get them. You might extend that a little more, but take away the surcharge. You don't need to have $1 billion floating around If when the economic times turn bad, you can always reinstate a
But Chris,
charge.
we rank 47th in the nation now for weekly benefits, which are $233 a week. It was down from $301 before we started. We only pay those benefits for 12 weeks.
Which is the least amount in the country.
Least in the country. Used to pay them for 20 weeks. Does it indicate that, as many on the left claim, that we've paid off this debt on the back of the unemployed?
Well, two-thirds, and one more statistic, we rank 49th in the country in terms of the percentage of people who have been laid off from their jobs who actually get unemployment. So only one other state actually has fewer percentage of people who are unemployed getting unemployment insurance. Roughly two-thirds of the debt was paid off with benefit cuts. The businesses did their share. Now their surcharge is gone. I think at least some of these benefit cuts should be restored. The whole point of unemployment insurance is when you get laid off, remember, through no fault of your own, there's still high unemployment areas in North Carolina, especially in our rural areas. Those people have families. They need to eat. They need to have a car to get to look for new jobs. So I think that
that takes legislative action, right?
It does, but I think the workers the working people in North Carolina did pay a lot of this debt back and have gotten nothing since the debt has been repaid.
John, a lot of people are saying that when we eliminate this 20% surcharge, it's going to stimulate job growth in the state. Do you agree with that?
It will reduce the payroll tax. There are actually three different reductions here because there's a federal tax that goes away, there's a state tax that goes away, and the experience rating on employers has changed in a way that's reduced the tax rate. The argument that you need the surcharge to stay on to build up a larger trust fund ignores the fact that we will run a surplus without the surcharge. In other words, the money going out is less than the money coming in. So we're going to build that trust fund up over time.
So we
unless
could
there's a
extend
recession.
benefits if we wanted to.
Well, I think the more important thing to do would be to build the trust fund up a little bit larger, because if we have another recession, God forbid a great recession, but even a modest-sized recession, we want to make sure we don't go back into debt again like we did the last time.
Dennis, you've watched this for a number of years, and you were in the legislature back in the 90s when we first started tinkering with the unemployment insurance rate for employers and had such a large surplus that we decided to cut it and then got in trouble. Are we doing too much too fast here?
Well, it's not if we have another recession, it's going to be when we have
another recession.
And we will, and it's a good point that John has made. But Tom, I think that where we are today, we're in a good spot. We need to recalibrate. We need to at least try to, I think, get this weekly rate up a little bit, and then maybe tie it to the consumer price index, something that would give certainty to both.
You're talking about benefits.
That's correct. Both, that would give certainty to the business and the model, and would give some certainty to people who are having to file for it.
All right, after these messages, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Hey everyone, I'm Linda Loveland. If feeding your family safe, affordable foods is a priority for you, then join me in saying thanks to the North Carolina farmers who feed us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's say thanks to the farmers who feed your family at #ThankNCFarmers. To learn more about the foods we eat and the farm families who feed us, visit feedthedialoguenc.com. And be sure to thank North Carolina farmers.
Clean transportation options can help you fuel what matters.
We're fueling what matters to us by converting our fleet of collection trucks over to compressed natural gas. It's a good, smart business decision, and having the air cleaner is something that benefits all the families that work with us.
We use biodiesel in our heavy equipment. We've got propane in a lot of our police cars, and we've really embraced the electric car. Join the city of Raleigh and fuel what matters.
To learn how you can fuel what matters, visit fuelwhatmatters.org.
Phones are getting smarter, cars more efficient, TVs bigger and more stunning. Imagine the same innovation from agriculture. Meet the Plant Sciences Initiative at NC State, a proposed state-of-the-art research complex where world-class researchers will tackle agriculture's toughest challenges, like feeding the world's rapidly growing population while preserving natural resources for future generations. Join Farm Bureau and NC State in moving North Carolina to the forefront of ag research in the world. Visit keepaggrowing.org.
We now return to NC Spin.
Well, when you come up to me on the street and talk to me about the show, the part that comes out as your favorite, unquestionably, is this next segment where we get the panel to tell us something we don't know. Chris Fitzsimon, we'll start with you.
Well, given all the controversy about the governor's alleged pay-to-play scandal, the private prison contract, and some other the FBI investigation into the Department of Health and Human Services, I started looking around, where can we find a good plan to reform state government, to have an open, honest, and transparent state government? So I was doing a little research, and I ran across one in 2008 that called for an Office of Open Government to make sure public records were given away on time, regular news conferences by the governor. Every 2 weeks, the reporters can ask him all these questions, the highest moral integrity about pay to play and a lot of other things. And it turns out that was Pat McCrory's campaign platform in 2008 when he talked about the culture of corruption in Raleigh. And now we are facing, I think we're on the danger of that culture reemerging if it already hasn't. And I would encourage the governor to go back to what he promised he would do when he first ran for governor and open up state government, release public records, have the highest integrity in his departments. I think we'd all be better off.
He still hasn't responded to the pay-to-play charge, has he?
He has responded to the articles, but he hasn't really responded about why he allowed that contract to go forward to a person who now we know 4 times.
You wrote a column about it this week.
Mentioned his campaign contributions. That's right.
Yeah. Gene Arnold, tell us something we don't know.
Tom, over the last 2 years, although teachers got some raises, they are still the lowest paid teachers than all of the 5 or 6 states that surround us, and that means South Carolina pays more to their teachers than we do. That's not good. In addition, if you adjust for inflation, we are spending less per student on our kids in the schools today than we did in 2008. There are a lot of things wrong with education, but that's 2 things that need to be fixed.
Oh, wait a minute. There was a report released this last week saying we're spending more than $9,000 per student, and it's the highest it's ever been.
I don't think that's no.
Not adjusted for inflation.
Exactly.
Okay. Oh, wow. Dennis, tell us something we don't know.
On last week's show, I think it was former Speaker Joe Mavretic talked about roadside litter, and he's right on target. And why should we care? Let me tell you a couple of reasons. I wrote some down. DOT spends over $15 million a year cleaning up trash on our roads. That's money to the taxpayers. In 2009, there were 440 accidents because of roadside litter. That makes our insurance go up. In 2013, there were 7 million pounds of roadside trash on our roads. And last, this is really interesting, 60% of the litter was by pedestrians, not motorists. They had the other 40%. And of that 40%, 60% of that was blown out, not thrown out. It's time to get serious about this problem. It's a very bad problem. I would urge our DPS and our DOT to upgrade their campaigns against roadside littering. The biggest landfill in the state is along our highways, and it's hurting North Carolina.
Interesting. John, tell us something we don't know.
Well, I was going to say that the rest of y'all didn't know that Dennis Wicker had signed us up to NC Spend to adopt a highway, but he's sort of given that away. What I was going to say is...
The cat's out of the bag.
Absolutely. I know this is not a shocker, but there's going to be a lot of independent expenditure in North Carolina next year, more than I think we even anticipated, I understand. And I think this illustrates why we need to allow donors to give money directly to political parties that are transparent rather than to shadow institutions.
All right, well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback and read our weekly column, visit the website ncspin.com or catch us on Facebook. We hope you'll join us next week when we've got a group of 4-H millennials giving us their views on today's issues. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.